Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into something kind of unnerving: tumorigenesis.
Ooh, yeah.
It's basically, how perfectly normal cells in our bodies go rogue and become cancerous.
Right.
Our main source material today is an article from Assay Genie called "Growth Factors Can Cooperate to Promote Tumorigenesis."
Great article.
Now, I know that title sounds a little intimidating, but trust me, we're going to break it down and make it easy to understand.
Definitely.
Our mission today is to really understand the role growth factors play in this whole process.
Yeah, it's fascinating how these little messengers can sometimes send the wrong signals and things go haywire.
So it's like a cellular communication breakdown.
Exactly.
But hold on, did you say that some of these growth factors can actually be both good and bad? Like they can prevent tumors but also promote them?
Yeah, it's true. Some growth factors, depending on what stage the cancer is at, can act as a tumor suppressor, but then later on, they can switch sides and become a tumor promoter.
They switch sides. Whoa, okay, this is getting interesting already.
It's like a double agent at the cellular level.
Okay, I'm hooked.
All right, well, let's start with the basics. What are growth factors and what role do they play in a healthy body?
Okay, lay it on me.
So, growth factors are basically proteins that act as signaling molecules.
Okay.
They tell cells what to do, like when to grow, when to differentiate, even when to die.
Oh, wow.
They're essential for all sorts of things like wound healing and embryonic development.
So it's like they're the foreman on a construction site, making sure everything gets built according to plan.
Exactly. But as you can imagine, if the foreman starts giving the wrong instructions, the whole project can go haywire.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, and that's kind of what happens with tumorigenesis. When the growth factor signaling gets messed up, cells can start growing out of control and form tumors.
So let's talk specifics. The article mentions a few key growth factors that are involved in cancer.
It does.
Can you walk us through those?
Absolutely. So first up, we have EGF, epidermal growth factor.
EGF, got it.
And this guy is all about promoting cell growth and differentiation, particularly in epithelial tissues like your skin.
Okay.
But if EGF signaling gets out of control, it can drive cells into a frenzy of uncontrolled growth, and that's when you start to see tumor development. There are actually two ways this can go wrong.
Oh,
One is you can have too much EGF around, kind of like a foreman yelling, build, build, build nonstop, even when there's no need.
okay, that makes sense.
And the other is you can have overexpression of EGF receptors.
Meaning?
It means there are too many receptors on the cell surface, all eager to bind to EGF and transmit the signal.
Oh, so it's like having way too many doors for those foremen to enter the cell and give their orders.
Exactly. And either way, you end up with excessive signaling, which can kickstart tumorigenesis.
Okay, so too much EGF is bad news. What about the other growth factors?
Well, next on the list is the FGF family, the fibroblast growth factors.
Oh, FGF, I've heard of those.
These guys are involved in a lot of different processes, but in terms of cancer, their role in angiogenesis is particularly worrisome.
Angiogenesis. Remind me what that is again.
It's the formation of new blood vessels.
Right.
Now, this is essential for normal tissue growth and repair, but it's also what allows tumors to grow beyond a certain size.
They need those blood vessels to get nutrients and oxygen, right?
Not precisely. It's like a growing city that needs roads and infrastructure to support its expansion.
Makes sense.
And FGF works closely with another growth factor called VEGF.
Oh, yeah, VEGF. That's a big one. I know it's a target for some cancer therapies.
It is. VEGF is a bit more specialized. It mainly acts on the cells that line blood vessels, stimulating their growth and proliferation.
So FGF is like the general contractor building the roads for the tumor, and VEGF is the expert in paving those roads.
Perfect analogy.
This is getting pretty complex.
It is.
So we've got EGF pushing cells to divide like crazy, and FGF and VEGF building roads for the tumor to expand its territory.
Yeah, we do.
But now, there's one more growth factor we need to talk about.
Ah, yes. The one with the split personality.
You mean TGF-beta?
That's the one. This growth factor is a real enigma.
You mentioned this earlier, the double agent growth factor.
Exactly.
I'm all ears. Tell me more about this TGF-beta.
Okay, so in the early stages of cancer, TGF-beta can actually be a good guy.
Ooh.
Yeah, it acts as a tumor suppressor, keeping cell growth in check and even promoting programmed cell death.
So it's like a security guard, making sure everything's running smoothly.
Exactly. But then, as cancer progresses, TGF-beta can switch sides.
What? How does that happen?
Well, scientists are still trying to figure that out, but it seems that the tumor microenvironment can corrupt TGF-beta, turning it from a protector into an accomplice.
That's crazy. It's like the security guard suddenly deciding to help the criminals escape.
It is kind of like that. And to make matters worse, TGF-beta can also stimulate the tumor microenvironment, making it even more hospitable for the cancer cells to grow and spread.
So not only does it switch sides, but it also helps the enemy build a stronger fortress.
Yeah, basically.
Wow. Okay, so we've got these four major growth factors, each with its own role to play, and some even changing sides as the cancer progresses.
Right.
But the big question is, how do they actually work together to cause all this trouble?
Yeah, how do these different growth factors cooperate to promote tumorigenesis?
Well, that's what we're going to explore in our next segment, so stay tuned.
This is getting good. I can't wait to dive into those details.
Me neither. We'll be right back after a short break.
See you soon.
All right, welcome back, everyone.
Back to the cellular drama.
Exactly.
So when we left off, we were talking about how these four growth factors play a role in tumorigenesis, right?
Yeah, EGF, FGF, VEGF, and our double agent friend TGF-beta.
Exactly. But these growth factors don't just work in isolation. They interact with each other in some really interesting ways.
So it's like a complex dance between these molecules.
That's a great way to put it. And sometimes this dance can lead to some pretty dangerous consequences.
So what kind of interactions are we talking about?
Well, one important mechanism is what's called crosstalk.
Crosstalk.
Yeah, you see, each growth factor uses specific communication channels or signaling pathways to relay its instructions within the cell.
Okay, so it's like dedicated phone lines for each foreman on that construction site.
Exactly. But sometimes these lines get crossed, and that's when you get mixed messages and amplified signals.
Oh, I can see how that could lead to problems.
It's like a construction site where the foreman for plumbing is accidentally getting instructions meant for the electrician. Chaos ensues.
That's a great analogy. And in the case of cells, that chaos can translate into uncontrolled growth and tumor development.
Precisely. This crosstalk can lead to the overactivation of oncogenic signals, the signals that tell cells to grow and divide uncontrollably.
So crosstalk is one way these growth factors can cooperate to promote tumorigenesis. What about the other ways?
Well, another important mechanism is their ability to manipulate the tumor microenvironment.
We talked about that a little bit earlier.
We did.
It's basically how growth factors can change the environment around the tumor to make it more conducive to growth and survival.
Exactly. And they have quite a few tricks up their sleeves. They can recruit other cell types to help out, promote the growth of new blood vessels, and even suppress the immune response.
It's like they're building a fortress for the tumor, making it harder to attack.
That's a great way to put it. They're creating a safe haven for the cancer cells to thrive and multiply.
This is incredible. It's like a whole military operation going on at the microscopic level.
Yeah.
The article also mentioned something called EMT induction, which sounded pretty intense.
Oh, yeah. EMT stands for epithelial mesenchymal transition.
Okay, break that down for me.
So epithelial cells are those nice, well-behaved cells that line the surfaces of our organs.
Right.
But mesenchymal cells are more like those rogue agents we were talking about earlier. They're more mobile and invasive.
Ah, I see where this is going.
And guess what? Growth factors like TGF-beta and EGF can actually trigger this transition.
They can turn those nice, organized epithelial cells into those rogue mesenchymal cells.
Exactly. It's like flipping a switch that makes those cells break free from their normal constraints and start wandering off.
And why is that a bad thing?
Well, this newfound mobility is a key step in metastasis, the process by which cancer spreads to other parts of the body.
Oh, right. Metastasis is what makes cancer really dangerous, right?
It is. When those epithelial cells undergo EMT, they gain the ability to move through tissues and enter the bloodstream.
So they can travel to distant organs and form new tumors.
Precisely. EMT is what makes cancer a systemic disease rather than just a localized problem.
This is all so fascinating, but also pretty alarming. It's like cancer has a whole army of molecular agents working behind the scenes to help it grow and spread.
It's definitely complex, but the more we understand these mechanisms, the better equipped we are to fight back.
And thankfully, researchers are making significant strides in developing new therapies that target these very pathways.
They are, and that's what we're going to be discussing in our next segment, so stay tuned.
I can't wait to hear about the latest breakthroughs. We'll be right back after a short break.
Looking forward to it.
All right, welcome back, everyone. We're ready to talk about some really exciting developments in the fight against cancer.
We are.
In the previous segments, we talked about how growth factors can go rogue and contribute to tumorigenesis,
We did.
and how they can interact with each other to create a perfect storm for cancer development.
Right. Things like crosstalk, manipulating the tumor microenvironment, and triggering EMT.
But now let's shift our focus to something more hopeful. What are some of the emerging research areas that are giving scientists new weapons in the fight against cancer?
Okay, well, one really exciting area is the study of microRNAs or mRNAs.
mRNAs. I've heard of those, but remind me what they are again.
Sure. So mRNAs are tiny molecules that act like puppet masters, controlling which proteins are produced in a cell.
They're like the master regulators of gene expression.
Exactly. And it turns out they can target genes that are involved in growth factor signaling.
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
So by manipulating mRNAs, we could potentially control the activity of those rogue growth factors and disrupt their cancer-promoting effects.
So it's like having a team of microscopic surgeons going in and making precise edits to the cellular code.
That's a great analogy.
This is incredible. It's like a whole new level of precision medicine.
It is. It's still early days, but the potential is enormous.
I'm really excited to see where this research goes. What other promising research avenues are there?
Well, another fascinating area is the study of cancer stem cells, or CSCs.
CSCs.
These are a small population of cells within a tumor that have a remarkable ability to self-renew and differentiate into various types of cancer cells.
So they're like the masterminds behind the tumor's growth and spread.
You could say that. They're the ones that drive tumor growth and resistance to therapy.
And what's the connection with growth factors?
Well, it turns out that growth factors play a critical role in maintaining the properties of these cancer stem cells.
Ah, so by targeting growth factor signaling in CSCs, we could potentially strike at the heart of the tumor's operation.
Precisely. If we can eliminate or control these cancer stem cells, we might be able to prevent tumor recurrence and achieve more lasting remissions.
This is all so groundbreaking. It seems like scientists are starting to crack the code of tumorigenesis, opening up entirely new possibilities for treatment.
It's a truly exciting time to be in the field of cancer research. The more we learn about these intricate molecular pathways, the closer we get to developing more targeted and effective therapies.
Okay, so we've covered the basics of growth factors, their role in normal cell regulation, and how their dysregulation can contribute to tumorigenesis.
Yeah, we've laid the groundwork.
We've also touched on some of the emerging research areas that are giving us hope for new treatment approaches.
Some really promising stuff.
But how are these discoveries actually being translated into real-world therapies? What are some of the specific targets that scientists are focusing on?
That's a great question, and that's exactly what we're going to delve into in our next segment. Stay tuned.
Can't wait. We'll be right back after a short break.
See you in a bit.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Now it's time to talk about the exciting world of targeted cancer therapies.
I'm excited for this part.
Me too. So, we've been talking about how growth factors are involved in cancer development.
Yeah, and how their signaling can go haywire?
Right. But now, let's talk about how scientists are using this knowledge to develop new treatments. What are some of the specific targets they're focusing on?
Okay, so the first and most obvious target is the growth factor receptors themselves.
Those are the proteins on the cell surface that bind to growth factors and kickstart the whole signaling cascade, right?
Exactly. They're like the doorways that allow those foremen to enter the cell and deliver their instructions.
And because they're located on the cell surface, they're relatively easy to access with drugs and other therapies. So the idea is to block these receptors, essentially shutting down the communication channel between the growth factor and the cell.
Exactly, like locking those doorways to keep the rogue foremen out.
And how do scientists do that?
Well, there are a couple of main strategies. One approach is to use small molecule inhibitors.
Small molecule inhibitors.
These are drugs that can bind to the receptor and prevent the growth factor from attaching.
Oh, I see. So it's like putting a jammer on a cell phone, preventing it from receiving calls.
I like that analogy. Another approach is to use monoclonal antibodies.
Monoclonal antibodies. I've heard of those, but I'm not exactly sure what they are.
So monoclonal antibodies are proteins that are designed to specifically target and bind to a particular protein, in this case, the growth factor receptor.
Ah, so they're like guided missiles that hone in on their target.
Exactly. And these antibodies can either block the receptor directly or flag it for destruction by the immune system.
So it's like sending in a specialized hit squad to take out the rogue receptors.
Precisely.
Wow. These approaches sound really promising. Are they being used in actual cancer treatments?
Yes, they are. EGFR inhibitors, for example, are used to treat certain types of lung cancer. And VEGF inhibitors are used in a variety of cancers, including colorectal, lung, and kidney cancer.
That's amazing. So targeting growth factor receptors is one promising avenue. What other targets are scientists exploring?
Well, another strategy is to target the signaling intermediates.
Signaling intermediates, those are the molecules that relay the message from the receptor to the nucleus, right?
Exactly. They're like the middlemen in the communication chain carrying those instructions from the doorway to the control center.
Got it.
And there are a number of key signaling pathways that are frequently dysregulated in cancer, including the PI3-KT-mTOR pathway and the MAPKIRK pathway.
Wow, those names are a mouthful.
They are, but what's important to understand is that these pathways are involved in cell growth, survival, and proliferation. And by targeting specific components within them, scientists can disrupt the flow of signals that lead to uncontrolled cell division and tumor growth.
So instead of blocking the door, we're intercepting the messages.
Precisely. It's like cutting the wires in a specific circuit, disabling a particular function without shutting down the whole system.
This is getting really sophisticated.
It is. And there are already drugs that target these pathways and are being used in cancer treatment.
Wow, so targeting the signaling intermediates is another promising avenue.
Yeah.
But is there anything else?
Well, there's one more approach that I think is really fascinating.
Oh.
And that's boosting the activity of negative regulators of growth factor signaling.
Negative regulators.
Think of them as the brakes in the system. They're molecules that dampen or counteract the effects of growth factor signaling, preventing things from getting out of control.
Oh, so they're like the checks and balances that keep the cellular engine from overheating.
Exactly. And in many cancers, these negative regulators are lost, or their activity is suppressed, allowing the growth factor signals to run rampant.
So the idea is to find ways to restore or enhance the activity of these negative regulators, essentially putting the brakes back on uncontrolled cell growth.
Precisely. And there are already some drugs that target phosphatases, which are enzymes that can dephosphorylate key proteins involved in growth factor signaling, essentially turning off the signal.
So it's like having a dedicated team of mechanics going around and making sure the brakes are working properly.
Exactly. This is still a relatively new area of research, but it holds a lot of promise.
This is all incredibly exciting. It really feels like we're on the cusp of a revolution in cancer treatment, moving away from the blunt instruments of chemotherapy and radiation toward more precise and targeted therapies.
I agree. The ongoing research into growth factors and tumorigenesis is paving the way for a new era of personalized medicine where treatments are tailored to the specific molecular profile of each patient's tumor.
And that's a future we can all be hopeful for.
Absolutely. The journey from understanding to effectively targeting growth factor signaling in cancer is a challenging one, but it holds the promise of yielding more precise and enduring treatments for cancer patients.
And that's a great place to wrap things up for today. This has been an incredible deep dive into the complex world of growth factors and tumorigenesis.
It has been a fascinating exploration.
I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too.
But before we go, I just want to remind our listeners that this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to learn about this incredible field.
Absolutely. And the more we learn, the closer we get to developing more effective treatments for cancer.
So, to our listeners, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning. The journey of discovery is never ending.
It's a journey worth taking.
I couldn't agree more. Until next time, stay curious.
Bye for now.
Okay, so before we jump back in, let's quickly recap what we've covered so far,
Yeah, good idea.
just to make sure everyone's on the same page.
So we started by talking about growth factors.
Right, the tiny messengers that tell cells what to do.
Exactly. And how important it is to have just the right amount of activity, not too much, not too little.
Right, like Goldilocks.
And we talked about how that balance can get disrupted.
Yeah, and that's when things can start going wrong, potentially leading to tumorigenesis.
Exactly.
We also got into the specifics of 4 major growth factors: EGF, FGF, VEGF.
And of course, our favorite double agent, TGF-beta.
Right. It's still kind of blowing my mind that a growth factor can switch sides like that,
I know. It goes from being a tumor suppressor to a tumor promoter.
like a cellular betrayal.
Yeah, it really is. But the tumor microenvironment can be pretty persuasive, it seems.
And we talked about how these growth factors can cooperate with each other to make matters worse.
They can crosstalk, sending mixed signals.
Like a bunch of crossed wires.
They can manipulate the tumor microenvironment, making it a cozy little haven for the cancer cells.
A fortress, even.
And they can even trigger EMT, allowing those cancer cells to break free and spread to other parts of the body.
It's incredible how much is going on at the microscopic level.
It really is. But the good news is that scientists are using this knowledge to develop new therapies that target these pathways.
That's the good news we need to hear.
We talked about strategies like blocking those growth factor receptors.
Like shutting the door on those rogue foremen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And inhibiting those signaling intermediates.
Intercepting the messages before they can do any harm.
And we even touched on the idea of boosting those negative regulators, the cellular brakes.
I love that analogy. They're like the unsung heroes keeping everything under control.
They are. And researchers are working on ways to restore their power.
That's exciting.
It really is. And the best part is it's all part of this larger shift towards a more precise, personalized approach to treating cancer.
Therapies that are tailored to the specific molecular profile of each patient's tumor.
Exactly. It's an exciting time to be in the field.
I bet. Okay, so now that we've got that recap out of the way, let's,
Yeah, where do we go from here?
well, remember how the article mentioned the tumor microenvironment?
It did.
We talked about a little bit how growth factors can manipulate it to favor tumor growth.
Yeah, but it's not just about growth factors, right?
Right. There are other factors at play as well.
And that's what I'm really curious about. What else is going on in that tumor microenvironment that might be contributing to cancer development?
That's a great question. And I'm sure our listeners are wondering the same thing.
I mean, our bodies aren't just isolated collections of cells, right? We're complex ecosystems constantly interacting with the world around us.
And that world can have a big impact on our health.
Absolutely. So what I'm getting at is, could our environment actually be influencing tumor development?
That's a fascinating idea. And a little bit daunting, to be honest.
I know. It's like realizing that even the things we don't think about, like the air we breathe or the food we eat, could be playing a role.
So you're saying that our environment could be shaping the tumor microenvironment and influencing those growth factors we've been talking about.
Exactly. And there's actually a growing body of research that supports this idea.
Wow, this is really making me think. So what are some examples of environmental factors that could influence tumor development?
Well, one area that's been extensively studied is the link between diet and cancer.
Okay, we've all heard that we should eat our fruits and veggies, but how does that actually relate to cancer prevention?
It's not just a catchy slogan.
I know.
There's real science behind it. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, they're all packed with antioxidants and other beneficial compounds.
Okay.
And those compounds can help protect our cells from damage caused by free radicals, those nasty little molecules that can contribute to cancer development.
So it's like giving ourselves a shield to protect them from attack.
That's a great way to put it. And on the flip side, there's also strong evidence that a diet heavy in processed meats, red meat, and excessive alcohol can increase the risk of certain cancers.
I guess it makes sense. We are what we eat, right?
Exactly. The food we eat literally provides the building blocks for our cells.
That's a good point. But it's not just about what we put into our bodies. It's also about how we move our bodies.
Absolutely. Physical inactivity has been linked to an increased risk of several cancers, including breast, colon, and endometrial cancer.
You know, I always knew exercise was good for me, but I never really made the connection to cancer prevention.
It's a powerful connection. Exercise can boost the immune system, help regulate hormone levels, and just generally create a more healthy internal environment.
Okay, so diet and exercise are two biggies. What else?
Well, chronic stress can also play a role. When we're stressed, our bodies release hormones like cortisol.
Okay.
And while cortisol is important for dealing with short-term stress, long-term exposure to high levels of cortisol can suppress the immune system.
And that can make us more susceptible to all sorts of diseases, including cancer.
Exactly. Stress can also promote inflammation, which we know can contribute to cancer development.
So it's like stress is giving those rogue cells a free pass to multiply and spread.
It can definitely create a more favorable environment for tumor growth.
Wow, this is really making me think about how I manage my stress levels.
It's a good reminder that taking care of our mental and emotional well-being is just as important as taking care of our physical health.
Absolutely. We need to take a holistic approach to health.
Right. It's all interconnected. Our genes, our lifestyle choices, our environment, it all plays a role.
This is all so fascinating and a little bit overwhelming, to be honest.
I know what you mean. It's a lot to take in, but it's also empowering.
Yeah, it is.
Because the more we understand about these connections, the more we can do to make choices that support our health.
Absolutely. So what's the takeaway message here?
I think the biggest takeaway is that our bodies are incredibly complex and adaptable,
Okay.
but they're also vulnerable.
True.
And we need to be mindful of the choices we make because those choices can have a ripple effect, influencing our health at the most fundamental level.
Powerful stuff.
It is.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We talked about growth factors, cell signaling, the tumor microenvironment,
Diet, exercise, stress.
It's been a whirlwind tour of cancer biology.
You. But a fascinating one, I hope.
Absolutely. But as we wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought to ponder.
Oh,
Lay it on me.
remember those cancer stem cells we talked about?
The masterminds behind tumor growth.
The ones that drive tumor growth and resistance to therapy.
Yes, those tricky little cells.
Well, scientists are making progress in understanding them,
They are.
but there's still so much we don't know.
Like what makes them so resilient?
And why they're so resistant to traditional treatments.
Exactly. Unlocking those secrets could be the key to developing even more effective treatments.
Treatments that can eliminate cancer at its roots.
That's the dream.
And with continued research and a healthy dose of curiosity, I believe we can get there.
I'm with you on that. It's a journey worth taking.
Absolutely. And that's a perfect note to end on. A message of hope, curiosity, and the enduring power of scientific discovery.
I like it.
So, to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of growth factors and tumorigenesis.
It's been a pleasure sharing this journey with you. Until next time, stay curious. Okay, so we've talked a lot about how growth factors can kind of go haywire and contribute to tumorigenesis.
Yeah, we've really delved into that cellular world.
And it's amazing, but also a little bit scary to realize just how much our environment can impact our cells.
It's true. We often forget that our bodies are constantly interacting with the world around us.
And that those interactions can really have a big impact on our health.
Right, like we were saying before, it's not just about our genes, it's about our lifestyle choices, our environment, everything plays a role.
Exactly. And speaking of the environment, we talked about diet and exercise, but what about other environmental factors? Things like exposure to toxins or even stress.
Yeah, those definitely play a role too. Let's start with toxins. We're exposed to so many chemicals every day, just through the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, the products we use.
It's kind of overwhelming when you think about it.
And some of these chemicals, like certain pesticides, heavy metals, industrial pollutants, they've been linked to an increased risk of cancer.
It's kind of scary, honestly.
It is a little bit, yeah. The thing is, we don't always know the long-term effects of these exposures. Some chemicals might take years or even decades to really show their harmful effects.
So what can we do?
Well, the good news is that our bodies have pretty amazing detoxification systems, and we can support those systems by making healthy choices.
Oh, that's good to know. So things like eating organic produce, filtering our water, choosing natural cleaning products, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Every little step we take to reduce our exposure to those harmful toxins can help protect our cells and reduce our risk of disease, including cancer.
Okay, that's empowering.
It is.
What about stress? I know chronic stress is bad for us, but how does it specifically relate to cancer?
Well, when we're stressed, our bodies release hormones like cortisol.
Right.
And while cortisol is essential for short-term stress responses, prolonged exposure to high levels of cortisol can actually suppress the immune system.
Uh-oh, and a suppressed immune system is not good news when it comes to cancer.
It's not, because it can create a more favorable environment for tumor growth. Plus, chronic stress can also promote inflammation, which we know is linked to cancer development.
So it's like stress is giving those rogue cells a free pass to multiply and spread.
It can definitely tip the scales in favor of those unhealthy cells.
Okay, this is making me want to go meditate or something.
It's a good reminder that taking care of our mental and emotional well-being is just as important as taking care of our physical health.
Absolutely. We need to think holistically.
Right. It's all interconnected. Our genes, our lifestyle choices, our environment, it all plays a role.
That's the big takeaway from this whole deep dive.
It is. It's not just about understanding the science of cancer. It's about understanding how we can create an environment, both internally and externally, that supports our health and makes us more resilient to disease.
Powerful stuff.
It is.
Well, this has been an incredible journey. We've gone from the microscopic world of growth factors and cell signaling to the bigger picture of how our environment can shape our risk of developing cancer.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
But I think the most important thing we've learned is that we have more control over our health than we often realize.
Absolutely. We're not just passive bystanders. We can make choices that empower us to live healthier lives.
And that's a message of hope.
It is.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. It's been so enlightening.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of growth factors and tumorigenesis. We hope you've learned something new and maybe even been inspired to take charge of your own health.
We hope so.
Until next time, stay curious.